Thank you, Shannon, so much, and welcome everybody. I'm Tanya Manning, and I am the U.S. Wealth Practice Leader and Chief Actuary at Buck, and also past president for both the Society of Actuaries and the International Actuarial Association. In addition, I'm a founding member of the Conference of Consulting Actuaries Women in Consulting Community, and I am thrilled to be here as part of our celebration of Women's History Month. Just one day past International Women's Day, and to have assembled with me today 5 women. And for the first time ever, we are in a moment, all 5 of the actuarial associations that are based in the United States currently have women as presidents. Now, we're not here just to celebrate this awesome moment in time, but we're here to also learn a bit from these women and understand their journeys and pathways to their leadership roles. I think you're going to find it very interesting and to understand what has inspired them along the way. Maybe that'll inspire you, and you'll probably get a little bit of good advice as we go along. Now, for those of you who might be interested in a more intimate conversation about some of the topics and ideas that were presented today, there will be a smaller group discussion, kind of a lunch discussion, if you will, sponsored by the Women in Consulting Community of the CCA, and that's going to be on March 15th. So if you want to find that out, you'll be able to drill in and have a little bit more of a discussion on what we're talking about today. But without any further ado, I would love to kick things off by hearing a little bit from each of our panelists. So if each of you could just take a couple of minutes, introduce yourself and your thoughts about what it means to you to be in your respective positions at this exciting time for the actuarial profession. And I'm going to start off with Ms. Jennifer Gillespie. Jennifer.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm Jennifer Gillespie, and I am serving as president of the Society of Actuaries. I'm a health actuary, and I'm based in the Minneapolis-St. Paul. I'm actually retired at this point, and I retired to do things that were fun, challenging, and fulfilling in my volunteer life. And one of those things is definitely being president of the SOA. Kathy, I'd love to hear more about you.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So I'm Kathy Antonello, and I am the current president of the Casualty Actuarial Society, the CAS. And I'm also president and CEO of Employers Holdings. We're a monoline workers' compensation carrier with a national footprint, and we are based in Reno, Nevada. So it's just an honor to be with all of you today and support and hopefully inspire the other women on the call that are in the profession or those that are just thinking about entering the actuarial career path. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'll turn it over to you, Ellen.
Thank you. I'm Ellen Kleinstieber, and I'm the current president of the Conference of Consulting Actuaries. I'm also the chief actuary at Bolton and member of the executive leadership team. I'm currently living outside of Cleveland, Ohio, but I originally grew up in Pennsylvania, so I spent most of my career in the Philadelphia market, and has ties back to Baltimore as well. I'm a pension actuary working in a more traditional consulting role, and I focus on single employer plans, associations, not-for-profits, and then I also dabble a little bit in post-retirement medical, public sector pension as well. And for me, my path to being CCA president started when the nominating committee called and asked if I would be willing to serve. And honestly, I would have rather had another year or 2 before I took this role on. But I found out that that would mean that CCA would, for the first time in their history, have back-to-back women presidents, and I would get to follow Maria Sarli, who was our president last year. And I thought, wow, the chance to make history is cool. And I had absolutely no idea what was about to come and what the other associations had going on. So I want to take a moment, give a heartfelt thanks to Jennifer, Kathy, Mary Ellen, and Virginia for agreeing to do this, and congratulate them on their roles as well. And it's really, really cool to make history with the 4 of you. Mary Ellen, I think you're up next.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Ellen Coggins. I'm the current president of the American Academy of Actuaries. I'm a consulting actuary with PricewaterhouseCoopers. And my practice area is P&C with a specialty focus in enterprise risk management. I can just say it has been a complete honor to serve as the president of the Academy thus far, and to really continue to volunteer in support of our amazing profession. And yes, I am so thrilled that my year in this role is one in which each of the actuarial organizations is led by a woman. It's just a great, great honor. Over to you, Virginia.
Thank you. Hi, I am Virginia Wentz. I am a pension actuary and the current president of the American Society of Enrolled Actuaries. My day job is the Director of Actuarial Services at the Man Marblestone Group, which is based out of the Philadelphia area. I am also honored to be representing my peers at ASEA, and I know there's been a lot of women ahead of me, behind me, however you want to say it, in the past, but I feel fortunate to be in this role where the stars have aligned and all 5 of the U.S. actuarial organizations are being led by women. So that's an exciting time, and it's a privilege to be in this position, and proud to be part of this historical group.
All right, thank you so much. So I hope you all agree we do have an impressive panel. So looking at the group I have before me, you all have really important leadership roles that are supporting our profession here in the US. So when you think about the path that's led you to where you are today, who would you consider to maybe be some of your role models that kind of led you or guided you or inspired you as you came along? And I'll start with you, Mary Ellen.
Okay, great. Let's see, while I've had many, many role models and mentors along the way, the person who comes to mind so vividly for me is Mary D. Miller. Mary was a P&C actuary, an insurance regulator, and a long-time and award-winning volunteer of the Academy and past president of the Academy. I met Mary when I first started volunteering and was fortunate to be able to spend more time with her at NAIC meetings when I was the chair of the Actuarial Standards Board, and she was presenting to the NAIC on the Academy's behalf. Mary was exceptionally strong. She spoke with extraordinary clarity. She was a fierce advocate of the profession, and she consistently encouraged the ideas of others. And I continue to think of Mary with awe when I think about what she gave to the profession over so many years. And for anyone interested in learning a bit more about Mary's journey into the profession, there's a great short video on the Academy's website that captures segments from interviews with leading women in the profession, including Mary. And the video is entitled "A Great Career for a Man." It really truly highlights just how far women have come in our profession. A great viewing if you have the chance. Jennifer?
Yes, that's lovely. I think that we have many mentors as we go along. And sometimes, excuse me, sometimes I don't think we know who they are at the time that we're actually interacting with them. And it may be later that we realize the influence that they had on the path that we take or the way that we handle things. Somebody who is definitely a mentor for me was my father. And that would be really in sort of the business aspect of things and business ethics. And one of the sayings that we always have is, a deal is fair if you would take either side. And I think that's a really important way for us to conduct our business, to think about, what's the perspective of the other party that we're working with. So I always carry that with me. And I think that any of us here could be actually inspiring some next leaders in the future. I certainly hope we are. And sometimes you have intentional mentors and sometimes they're the unintentional ones. Kathy.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, when I think back, I guess over my 36 years in the industry, and it's hard to believe it's been that long, but I've been fortunate enough to work with really some of the brightest actuaries in the business, and many of them rose to to, you know, some of the highest positions, right, of like partners in their firm or CEO. And, you know, throughout my career, I think what I've tried to do is emulate those characteristics that I most admired in every single one of them, right? So, you know, one may have been, you know, had a really commanding presence in a room, and another may have been very thoughtful and caring. And then, you know, someone else may have just been able to analyze a financial statement in record time or something, you know. So when I look back, I don't think I really had one single role model, but I would like to think that I've tried to pick up the best elements of everyone that I've worked with. I guess, though, you know, I'd also add that you can learn an awful lot from those that aren't necessarily role models and people you don't necessarily want to aspire to be like. You know, so you just have to remember that when you work with difficult people, the lessons are really endless, right? And you can emerge more resilient and with a really clear picture of some of the qualities that you don't want to emulate in people. So, you know, I'd like to think I just have looked back over my career and throughout seen that there are lessons to be learned everywhere and from everyone.
Thank you all three. Those are beautiful things to share. And what I'm hearing is, you know, inspiration comes from many different ways and role models. It could be a family member, it could be another volunteer that you really admire, or you can just pick things along the way, as I like to do with myself, Kathy. Everyone, you can learn a little bit of something and to refine your style and approach from almost everyone you meet. And that could be an actuary, it could not be an actuary, it could be someone at your company. And it doesn't have to be a woman, it can be anyone. But, you know, there's always people out there who are going to do things just the way that you want to do it, or absolutely the way that you don't want to do it, right?
Yes.
So thank you very much. All right, we're going to do some segment breaks here. So here's a segment break. For those of you just joining us, we have the pleasure of hearing from all of the women currently serving as president of their respected actuarial associations. So that's right, all 5 US-based actuarial associations have what you see before you is 5 women presidents. So we're going to move on to our next and talk a little bit about women in the profession. And I would like to learn a little bit more about over the profession of your careers. What changes have you guys seen that have affected women, positive or negative? And let's start with you, Virginia, if you could share your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think back often to conversations that I've had with my mother. When she was young, getting ready to go to college, she was very interested in the chemistry field, and she was discouraged from pursuing that as a woman. Just wasn't something that she really should be doing. So I compare that to my own, you know, education, and all along the way, elementary school, junior high, high school, college, I was always encouraged by my teachers, you know, to pursue that field because that was where my strength was, and you know, that's a significant difference. And also, I just think about her life in general. She was a single mother. My father had died young, so she was raising the 2 kids, and she had a very difficult time getting a credit card, which I think, you know, younger people don't realize that that's something that was a problem back in the day. So, you know, those kind of things really stand out to me, that I don't feel like I've had the challenges that she had as a woman.
Virginia, that wasn't that long ago. Like, what year? We're not talking about the 1800s, right?
Well, I mean, she was a little bit older than a lot of my friends' mothers, but that would have been in probably the 70s.
Yeah,
like 60s, early 70s.
I think that's probably shocking to some of our younger attendees and viewers here that just that recently there was this issue where women were not available to even get their own credit card. So definitely advances be made. Mary Ellen, how about we hear from you?
Sure. Yeah, I think perhaps the most significant change that I've seen that's positively impacted women is really a far greater acceptance of different timelines for achieving career goals. When I was in the early stages of my career, most women I knew who were juggling careers and raising children, did their very, very best to be successful at everything. But were more routinely overlooked for senior positions given the perception, all right? So the perception about their inability to really give 110%. And for many senior positions, there was a somewhat unspoken timeline for reaching various career milestones. But so many of these locked in expectations have changed, or they're continuing to change. And now there's just a far greater openness to alternative pathways to success for women, regardless of how they define success. And those changes ultimately benefit, women, but they ultimately benefit men as well. So it's just so wonderful to see.
I think that's so true, Mary Ellen. We're not just in a moment where we have all 5 associations led by women. I'm going to say that a million times, but I'm so excited about it. I think it bears repeating. But also we're in a moment where our workforce is really changing the way that they are being treated as employees and how they work remotely and how they spend their time and break up their day. And in some ways, it is being led by women who are probably at the forefront of demanding more flexible schedules and more understanding of their pathway in their career and what they, when they were focused on this and that and how much that 110% is possible. But we have to understand that people have a very large amount of them that they have to spread out to work and otherwise, and we need to understand that expectations are changing. And I think if we did not have such a significant shift in the workforce toward women, I'm not sure if we would have been able to get here or had as understanding leaders to be able to enable that. Do you agree with that, or is that?
Completely, yeah, and really, really well said.
Yeah, and Tanya, I had a conversation recently with a fellow board member of mine who spent most of her career working remotely. She wanted to stay home to be more accessible to her children, but she was also committed to her career. And she's been very successful at it. And she shared with me, she was the only person in her office who did that for a very long time. And then many years later, someone else came along and wanted that same kind of arrangement. And then we had a manager that was not keen on this, but this first person went and advocated for this younger person to have that opportunity. And they agreed. And then she went to the younger person and said, just so you understand, you're not just doing this for you. You're doing this for every woman who comes up through our office and our company who wants to have this same kind of arrangement. And, so if you don't do well with this, you take away that opportunity, not just for you, but for other people. And, as we talk about women moving into leadership roles and being more assertive and asking for what they want, it's important for us to also remember that we're not just doing it for ourselves as individuals, we're also doing it for our other women who want to have the same opportunities. We're doing it for other men, we're doing it for everyone who wants to have an opportunity that's different than the baseline or the norm or the way it's always been done. And to understand that part of that is being a leader and showing that this is how it can be done, and it can be done well, and it can be done successful, and other people should get those opportunities as well.
Great, thank you, Ellen. Some really inspiring words here. We did have a question, and Ellen mentioned, you're doing this for the whole profession. And I don't know if, as a follow-up, and maybe Mary Ellen or Virginia, you can share this. Have you ever felt an overwhelming responsibility as you think about these changes and your role in representing what women can be? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I can jump in first. I don't think it's ever felt overwhelming. I think it just has been very exciting, just an exciting opportunity to contribute and to help affect change. So it's really just been kind of a thrill along the way, knowing that, for a future generation of women, you know, their opportunities are going to be so different, and just so grateful that you can contribute in some way to their success.
Yeah, I think I'm a little slower to recognize that position. I just don't really think about, you know, being a woman in whatever position. Things have just, you know, happened, and but it's pointed out to me, and so I appreciate that, and you know, happy to help other people in those positions.
I remember, Virginia, when I was doing an interview in China when I was president of the Society of Actuaries, and they were going to be asking us all these questions, and the SOA had me, like, Jennifer can appreciate this, like fully armed, like all the possible media questions, and I'm all ready, you know, what is the profession doing this, how hard are exams, all these things. And I remember a female reporter at the end, she's like, I have one more question. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, so how do you handle being a woman in this leadership role? And I was like, you, Virginia, I'm like, oh yeah, there's that, you know, and you forget that, you know, this is unusual or being noted by other people. So thank you for your comments. And I think we're all being observed in different ways, women, men, otherwise, but sometimes you do need that little bit of a reminder of, you know, this is what it's about and this means something. So, all right. So thank you very much for that. Getting a little bit more in the profession, I'd like to hear from some other folks about, over the course of the last several years, the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion has been at the forefront of many discussions. And I would say if it's been over the last several years, it has gotten an exclamation point over the last couple of years. Now, these discussions include issues affecting women specifically, and I'm curious as far as what advice do you have for women within the profession specifically? And for this, we're going to start with you, Ellen, please. Thank you. I think you're on mute.
See, I was afraid that was going to happen. So I'll tell a story from pretty early in my career. I was maybe 6 or 7 years into my career, and a client of mine was going through a corporate merger, and in the U.S., the sort of the other side's parent company won, so to speak, as they were kind of divvying up the leadership roles. So I was asked, we were working on merging 2 pension plans, kind of redesigning them, harmonizing them. And as part of this, it was like this massive rush project. So I was living an hour away from the office. I would pack a suitcase Monday morning, drive into work, go stay at a hotel Tuesday, Wednesday, sometimes Thursday night, not get home till Friday night, doing 14, 16-hour days. And those were the short ones. And then at a point every other week, I would fly up to Boston and spend 3 days on site with a client. And it became clear very quickly, this client, they didn't want to work with us. They wanted to work with a consultant that they were used to working with. But they were told, you're going to work with this firm. And they didn't particularly, most of them in leadership didn't really want me there. So I'd walk down the hallway and some of the senior leaders in HR and finance would literally look the other direction and not say hello to me. In the middle of all of this, my mother passed away very suddenly. So you guys can just imagine, you know, I'm 28 years old and my world has just been turned upside down and I'm being thrown into this crazy pressure cooker situation. So as we're having an internal team meeting with the key account manager and the lead actuary and myself, we were talking, and you know, they asked me how it was going. I kind of relayed what it's like being on site there. And this senior VP, one of the leaders in our company, said, well, that's a lot for you to take on, and I really appreciate what you're doing. When we get to the end of the year, I'm going to look at getting you some sort of like hazard pay or extra bonus for everything you've gone through this year and all the effort you put in. And I was like, cool. You know, I'm not motivated by pay, but that doesn't mean I don't like to be recognized for things. End of the year comes, no extra pay, no bonus. And when I'm in a meeting and at the end of it, I say, hey, you know, what about that thing we talked about? And this person looked at me and said, what, you want a cookie for doing your job? And I lost it. I started crying and I got up and I walked out of a senior vice president's office. Later that year, I was up for promotion, my first promotion to assistant vice president. And I was very excited. And there was a colleague of mine who was a very dear friend of mine, and he was up for promotion as well. I'm like, how cool is this? We're going to go through this together. This is so exciting. Promotion list came out. His name was on it and mine wasn't. Now, I want to be clear, he was very qualified for this, but so was I. And when I went and said, I don't understand what happened, the answer I got was that this person who had offered me the little bonus and then took it away said, well, she's too emotional and she's not mature enough to handle that kind of a role. And out of all of this, for me, came, first of all, once I got over the embarrassment of the situation, I ended up having a conversation with the leader of our office, who I didn't really know before that. And he became a coach to me, and he became an advocate for me. Now, I'm told he also pulled this guy aside and said, are you stupid? Or some variation on that, like you can't treat people this way. And he worked with me over the course of the next year so that when the next round of promotions came up, I was a slam dunk lock. And he became a friend, he became a coach, he became a champion for me. And just someone who I enjoyed spending time with and learned a lot from along the way. Now, coincidentally, the next year came along, and because of some redistricting within our region, the person who's supposed to champion me changed and the ball was dropped and I didn't get promoted a second year in a row. Not because of anything else, but it turned out, I found out through that second round of promotions, the person who vetoed me the first time, the day the request for promotions came in, he walked into his boss's office and said, you need to get her name on that list and you need to get it on the top of the list right now, and I will go and fight for her to get it. I screwed up. So when you hit adversity, take it as a bump in the road and say, you know what, I'm going to keep going. If I know I deserve this, I know I'm good enough for this, keep fighting for it. And sometimes out of adversity comes success, because I ended up with, through my first denial, a champion, an advocate, a mentor. Through my second round, I ended up with another person who played those same roles for me. And they were later instrumental in getting me on the radar of other leaders in the company who helped give me opportunities that I might not have gotten if I had just gotten that first promotion. And then my second promotion came even faster. And my opportunity for a third promotion came even faster. So it's not always, the old saying, like something knocks you down, get up, dust yourself off and keep walking and look for those opportunities.
Well, Ellen, what I heard there was it is important to have an advocate. And as I say, someone in the room where decisions are being made that affect your career, that is a champion and an advocate and recognizes what you're bringing to the table. Mm-hmm. But what I also heard was you were maybe your first advocate because you stood up for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I bet every woman on this panel has had a moment when they have had to stand up for themselves. Mm-hmm. But I also heard something else, and I'm going to say it's this thing that's become a taboo sometimes with women, but it shouldn't be. And you said you broke out into tears and you left the room. And I can tell you, I have cried at work. And I don't know if my other panelists have, but I've had remarks by male colleagues sometimes like, oh, she's a crier. She's so emotional. She does this and that. I don't see this as a fault, and I'd like to stop making this a thing. I think that, this is how people react, and sometimes women react. And I think it's just this expression of emotion sometimes that gets people put aback a little bit. So thank you for sharing that very personal story. And I think, Kathy, you had something you'd like to share as well?
Yeah, when I think about what advice I would give other women, for me, something that's worked really well is taking risks in my career. Because, I've always felt like the best opportunities sometimes arise and come your way when you step out of your comfort zone and take a real chance on something. I did it when I was earlier in my career, and I was one exam away from my fellowship in the Society of Actuaries, and I pivoted and started taking CAS exams instead. That was over 25 years ago, and that worked out pretty well for me. You know, and then more recently, I mean, within the last few years, I moved alone to Reno, Nevada to become chief actuary of my current company. You know, my husband stayed in Florida where his job was because that was important for some stability. And then less than a year later, the CEO announced he was going to retire. And that's worked out for me as well and for my husband. So, you know, my advice is to take a chance. And I don't think that women as much as men are willing to do that sometimes. So expand your horizons, and you never really know where it might lead. It can be pretty exciting.
Thank you, Kathy. We have a question from one of our attendees that, do you think risk-taking was successful, not only because you took the risk itself, but because others respected that you took that risk? Is there a little bit of that?
I do. I think people view you, and I'm not saying that it's all about this, but I think people view you a little bit differently when you're willing to take a step that others might not necessarily take. So it's hard to quantify, but I do think that you might be viewed as a little gutsier than the rest of the crowd. So and there's some value in that.
I totally agree. It's a part of that persona and how you're kind of you show yourself as fearless, and then you eventually, yeah. Thank you. Jennifer, did you have something to share on this?
Sure. Topic? And I'm going to add on because I have to talk about crying now that the subject came up. So I have cried at work a few times. I cry when I'm like, you know, really happy, really sad, really angry, whatever. But I was in a SVP office, tears started, but I didn't leave. You know, he like handed me Kleenexes and we continued on. And, you know, I felt very passionate about the subject that I was talking about, which is why I was there. And later on, like a couple years later, he was telling the story. I'm like, oh, he's going to tell about me crying in his office. And I was feeling really bad about it. But what I learned is the emotional stuff didn't keep the subject matter. Like she stayed with it. You know, she told me what the issue was. That was just like the crying was periphery. Like it doesn't mean you're weaker or that you can't, you know, you're going to give up or something. And so he'd actually gotten a message about, you know, women are stronger than just the tears or something that I thought was, that was an unexpected bonus from when he told the story. But the other thing that I want to share is for anybody, and definitely for women, that if you're feeling like you're maybe the opportunities aren't coming at work as quickly as you were hoping, or you're ready to take a risk like Kathy was talking about, volunteering is a great way to do it. And I think obviously you can tell from all of our organizations, we all support diversity, and there's room for all sorts of ways to volunteer. And we encourage all kinds of people, anybody that's interested, to participate. And it gives you a chance to practice some skills. Maybe it's leadership, maybe it's writing, maybe it's communication for groups or presentations or research, whatever. You get to practice in maybe a safer environment, more supportive environment, because you're not being judged by your boss or maybe your coworkers. And you know, you build a network of people who might be those advocates for you. Even if they're outside of your company, they might be the ones that kind of hold you up. And so I encourage you that that's another place to grow if you're feeling like you're in a flat spot.
I love that. And I have used that method myself, and I can attest to the effectiveness. Before we move on to our next section of questions, we had a few really good questions submitted by some attendees that I wanted to kind of toss out there and see what you guys think. And the first one, you may have to think a little bit on, but the question is basically, you know, how do you handle these situations where you're getting opportunities, maybe in part because you are a woman? I don't know if anyone's ever felt that that's kind of happened or that's part of that decision process. Has anyone think they may have experienced that? And if so, how do you handle that? Or how would you handle that or recommend someone to handle that kind of odd situation? Anybody?
Sure,
Yeah.
I can start and hand it over. Yeah, I mean, I have felt that, but I also had to, you know, I came to understand when I really thought about it that even if in fact the balance went toward me because I was a woman, I wouldn't have been asked to take something on if I wasn't qualified. And I just learned to lean into it, just to really accept it and just be the best I could be, and use that as an opportunity to really demonstrate why, I was the right choice. And it actually provided me with, a great amount of energy when I did have those feelings, because, it inspired me to do even more and share even more, and ultimately ended up in great learning opportunities for me.
Love that, Mary Ellen. I think we have one more person who wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo what Mary Ellen said. I think she's spot on. There have definitely been times when I've felt like the token woman in the room, or the other side brought a woman because I was going to be included in the meeting or something to that. But I think I would agree with what Mary Ellen said. Even if ultimately you got the position or got the opportunity because you're a woman, you still have to prove yourself once you're in the role. And, so I've never given it a whole lot of thought. I've had that feeling, but I just press forward once I'm in the role and prove myself and prove anyone wrong if they ever had that thought.
Yeah, Kathy, I feel like opportunity comes in many different ways.
You're
and
right.
If I'm qualified, if I'm on that panel because they want to have a diverse panel based on gender, whatever, if I'm qualified, I'm going to show up, and you're going to hear from me, and you're going to see exactly why that was a great decision, not just because of my gender. So I think that is really important. And one of our attendees made the comment about, sometimes women struggle with what's called imposter syndrome. Bet you all know what that is, and how do you fight that? Do you guys have any issues? Like, how do you work through that issue? Like, am I really supposed to be here? I think we've all had those moments. As much as I'm trying to be like, I'll take that opportunity, I've had my moments where I thought, well, maybe I really am not qualified to be there. Does anybody? Ellen, I think you want to respond.
I saw that, and I actually started typing a response back to it before you brought this up. I sit here and I look around almost every day and say, how the bleep did I get here? Like, how did this happen? Because all I did, like in my head, all I did was I showed up to work, I worked hard, I gave the best that I could. And if someone asked, here's what I think what part of the key is. If someone asked me to do something, I said yes. Now, sometimes that was to my detriment, and I said yes too many times, and I found, actually at points in my career where I sort of had this abundance of riches, and I, worked myself into kind of a bad place because of it. But know that, believe in yourself, be honest with yourself about what your abilities are, and don't be afraid. If somebody else sees something in you where they're asking you to take on something, trust in them, even if you don't trust in yourself.
Very good.
And when someone takes that chance on you or gives you an opportunity, make it your mission and your job to live up to the expectations that they set for you. Someone's going to be your champion. Prove to them that they were right. And you're not an imposter. You're just human.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ellen, but I agree so strongly with you. I just want to make that point. As we often do agree. One attendee did ask us to define imposter syndrome. Jennifer, you want to give that a shot? You're very good at defining things, I found.
It's when you think that, like, you got here without the skills, that you're pretending to be competent, or that you're pretending to be a leader, or whatever position that you're in, that you're not really everything that everybody thinks you are, kind of thing.
Yeah,
it happens to anybody, but it's more frequent to women.
Yeah, it's when you're sitting in the room and you self-doubt that you're actually qualified to be in the room, even though you are fully qualified. And it is something that is not exclusive to women, but is definitely much more common to women. So thank you for adding to that. One just real quick check-in. I think I'll save this other question for later if we have time, but we're going to do another segment break. I feel like I should have a commercial with this, but it's a segment break because we're trying to break this down into 3 segments. So for those of you joining us, I should pause a little bit. So for those of you joining us, we have the pleasure of hearing from all 5 women that are currently serving as president of the 5 actuarial associations based in the US. And we are all enjoying the conversation and learning a lot and getting a little inspired along the way. So our last segment is going to focus on volunteering, and Jennifer's already brought this up and I've given her a high five, I agree, but I want to learn a little bit more about what volunteering has meant for some of the other panelists. So we're going to start off a little bit and ask this question. So how has volunteering benefited you particularly, and how do you make it more enticing for women and their employers to bring forth those volunteers as well? And we're going to start off with you, Virginia, and see what you have to share there. Thank you.
Sure. And, you know, speaking of imposter syndrome, I suffer very much from that. Always doubting the reasoning why I am where I am. But I am trying to adjust my thinking. And I did get into volunteering relatively late. I'm surrounded by it. My husband has volunteered a lot, and, you know, bosses and mentors definitely volunteered. But I would say, as far as how it's benefited me, I mean, I'm still learning new skills, you know, presentation skills, discussion skills. Again, adjusting to different personalities and learning how to work within a group that has a variety of different personalities. I think those are all very valuable things to learn, and something you may not always get to in your day-to-day job. And as far as making it more enticing for women, I think it is just that, getting the experience, getting out there, and learning new things, meeting new people, and for the organization. I know when I brought up, you know, whether I should be stepping into this role with ASCA, my employer was all for it. You know, the more exposure we get, the better off it is. So I think that certainly can be a selling point, and also, again, improves my skills that will be used for their benefit. So I think that sums it up for me.
Thank you. And Ellen, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, you know, I think Virginia sort of laid a good groundwork for kind of advocating for volunteering and giving back to the profession. And, you know, for me, it's been an opportunity in some of my volunteer activities to practice some of the essential and foundational skills I need for consulting and leadership, right? Whether starting with public speaking and doing it in a relatively safe and supportive environment, talking to other actuaries. Now, some people may say that's scary, right? Because you're talking to other people who you might feel like this is the imposter syndrome. Well, there's people in the audience who probably know more about this topic than I do. And yes, but those who do have likely been there and been in your shoes and will support you through that. And it's a chance to go out and practice. Things like recruiting for other other continuing education events gives you the opportunity to cold call people, email people, persuade them, recruit them, leading a committee. All these kinds of skills that I could then, for me, take back to my day job and help make me a better consultant, a better manager, and ultimately built up to and led to my opportunity to become chief actuary of my firm. And then in that role, the things that I learned leading a practice and managing people and managing, you know, a P&L and helping, you know, supporting as part of our leadership team, running the company and the business, then has made me a better CCA president, because I bring these two different roles and different perspectives and things that I learn in each of them to the other one. So it's a great way of just diversifying your skill set. And I think you'll find if you go out and volunteer, the other people you're volunteering with are in the same boat as you are. They're trying to achieve the same kind of goals and learning as you are. They're just as scared that they're not going to do a good job as you are, and you're all in it together. You know, and it's a great way, as Virginia said, of networking, raising your personal profile, your firm's profile, and all of these are good things that just can start to snowball for you and lead to one opportunity leads to the next opportunity, whether it's in your volunteer life or in your work life.
That's lovely. Thank you both for sharing that. I have to say, when I started volunteering, it was mostly women. I'm sorry, mostly men. Hello. I think this panel has like brainwashed me, but it was mostly men. And but as I went through, it helped me because there was mostly men at my firm as well. It allowed me to build this connection with other women who were in the profession and who were very ambitious and had great leaderships and things I could learn from, like Kathy was talking about earlier. And I kind of built my tribe of women who I could go to and could support me, and I could support them as well. So I think there's that as well. It just kind of expands your network. If you're at a place that's still progressing toward better gender diversity, you can sometimes find that a little quicker or in a different way if you go and do your volunteering work. Now there was one question that I find provocative, so I'm going to ask and see if anybody wants to answer it. And that is, have you ever felt there's a different standard or recognition for women volunteering versus men? And I'm not talking about the bouquet of roses for the versus, you know, a trophy or something like that. But has anyone ever seen that, meaning that we get less credit for it? Or do you feel like it's really pretty level playing field? Kathy's shaking her head, so I'll let Kathy answer that.
I haven't seen that. I think it's an interesting question. I haven't really given it a lot of thought, but I can't say that I've felt it.
Yeah. Mary Ellen, you seem to agree. So thank you for
completely
that.
agree with Kathy. Yeah.
So I've had the opposite. So the first time I wanted to run for president of the Society of Actuaries, I did not get a warm reception on that from my company. And I think that is different than what they would have done for a man. So I wasn't in a consulting company, so it wasn't as obvious of a decision of it being good for the company. But the fact that you're raising your profile, you're doing your leadership skills, all of that, I think that they might have valued that differently if it had been a man asking. So I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't have a direct comparison, but that's makes me wonder.
All right. I'm going to say something that's going to trigger a lot of anger in some women, but one of our attendees said, it makes me think of the welcome to your leadership role or your role on this committee. You'll be taking notes because you're the woman. But I think we've gone past that in some regards. I am notoriously terrible at taking notes, so that has kind of worked me out of that. We all have our strategies, but thank you for that comment. And yeah, that actually is a thing. I think it's becoming less of a thing, fortunately. All right, we have one more question, and then I will say that while it wasn't part of the plan questions, we've had a lot of women who are wanting to get some information about how you got started in the profession and some things we've done to break those glass ceilings outside of the volunteer role. But I will say that we wanted to focus on the volunteer aspect of leadership, just because, again, we're at this moment, and I'll say it one more time, where all 5 associations based in the US are led by women. But I think that's a great follow-up. If we have time, we'll fit it in. But we're focusing on that aspect for this panel. But thank you for your questions and all of the encouraging notes that I'm seeing in the chat. So bringing it down, we have our last question is for everyone, for all of the panelists. And I want to know, what advice would you give to your younger self, knowing what you know now? So not that you're old, but you were younger at some point. So maybe just think about that and reflect on that for a little bit, as far as what advice, what key thing, kind of like what I wish I'd known, so to speak. And Virginia, we'll start with you.
Okay. I have a feeling this will come up a lot, but I would say start earlier and step out of your comfort zone. Take the risks, especially on the volunteering side. It's an easier way to take some risks and not, have everything at stake. So I would, I would definitely say, start right away, taking risks, speaking up, asking more questions. really putting yourself out there a little bit more. Jennifer?
Yeah. So I think mine might have a little bit to do with the imposter syndrome, or maybe more specifically, feedback that I would get periodically that I wasn't a leader because I didn't lead like a man. And I always found myself in leadership situations, whether it was the Girl Scouts or the school paper or the whatever. And when it was, mixed gender. So it's kind of like I knew I was a leader because I always ended up there. But I would get that feedback that I wasn't really a leader. And so that plays with your head a little bit of wondering whether you really can be. So I would, encourage my younger self to stick with your confidence, stick with what you've done, and not listen to those naysayers.
Jennifer, I do remember being at a board meeting where you would have a walk-up song for your presentation.
Yes.
Haven't seen a lot of men do that. Don't care. It was great. Lead like you want to lead. You don't have to lead like a man. So thank you very much for that. Sorry to interrupting, but it just brought back a fond memory of mine. So Kathy?
Yeah, I think I'd probably loop back to the topic of being a self-advocate. I think I would tell myself to speak up for what I'm worth and what I deserve in terms of, opportunities for career growth and career advancement and so forth. I think for years, I thought if I put in the time and the effort, I would get recognized. And it does happen, but it happens much quicker when you're your own advocate, right? And you get really comfortable recognizing your own strengths and advocating for yourself. And I see it a lot. I don't think women do it enough. I know I didn't do it enough, and that's probably what I would tell myself to do. Speak up for yourself more.
Right. Ties back to Ellen's comments earlier. So thank you, Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Ellen, what would you tell the younger Mary Ellen?
Yeah, I think to better understand the value of the volunteer experience, that it's far richer and more impactful than I initially anticipated. I started my volunteer experience for the purpose of contributing to some academy work that was focused on evolving practices in ERM. And I quickly learned that, I just received so much more than I felt I was contributing. And while I've been in a consulting actuary for most of my career, and therefore I've worked with many, many different actuaries over time, working on a common project with actuaries across different practice areas, each with vastly different experiences, really an opportunity that's fully afforded through volunteer work. It's just so extraordinarily rewarding. And just a story about that, a few years back, while I was at a particularly demanding time in my life, I thought once again about work-life balance. I was extremely busy with the career that I love. I was contributing quite a bit of time as a volunteer. And coming from a large family and having children of my own, there are always so many wonderful opportunities to focus my time. But I remember my husband at that point, trying to be helpful, suggested that perhaps I could ease up on volunteering a bit. And I just instinctively rejected that idea, because my volunteer life provided me with an opportunity to learn so much more than I ever would on my own. And I just enjoyed it so much. And it was about that time I was driving to a client and heard the results of a study yet another study that examined career happiness. And I remember the findings were somewhat surprising to the researchers, since they found that those individuals who were happiest with their careers were also people that supplemented their careers with another partial job or passion. And I think this speaks to some earlier comments, because the thinking was that the career reflected really what the person was really good at and committed to, but perhaps had restrictions, some type of restrictions related to it. While the part-time job was where a person can be far more creative and exploratory. And this report really hit me as it perfectly expressed why I just love my volunteer experience so much. It just so greatly enhances what I'm able to contribute to my primary actuarial career, and frankly, my overall fulfillment.
I don't know, Mary. If I hadn't already volunteered, Marilyn, I would run right out now and find a way to do it. That was the most beautifully worded expression of why you should volunteer. Maybe I just think that's beautiful, and thank you so much. There were so many great thoughts shared there, but I really like that diversity of thought, and not just the types of people you're interacting with, but the types of actuaries. And I agree with you, being exposed to actuaries who have different backgrounds, they think differently, they solve problems differently, and it just broadens your world. Thank you. That was just beautiful. Ellen, we're going to let you close out this particular question. So what thoughts do you have?
You know, I when I first saw this question that we were going to talk about, I struggled with it, because I sit here today and now, with the benefit of hindsight, I look back on it and say, very frankly, there's not a whole lot I would change, right? Or that I would do differently, because I now know how it's all going to work out for me. But as I sit here in this year where I'm going to celebrate my 30th year in this profession, I think what I would tell myself is, you don't know it now, but you've already set yourself on the path to success. When you were in college, you raised your hand for some things you didn't actually think anyone was going to take you up on. Gosh, by golly, they did. And you already started learning some leadership skills and some of the foundational things. So be patient with yourself. Don't measure yourself against the person next to you. Measure yourself by the path that you're on and where you need to be and what you need to be doing to continue growing and learning and developing as yourself within your profession. Don't be afraid to be yourself, and don't let anybody else tell you that being your authentic self isn't enough. And by the way, don't tell yourself that you aren't enough, because I used to do that to myself all the time. I still do on occasion. And just be gentle to yourself, and be patient, because it's all going to come together in the end for you. And you're going to end up in a place where you have amazing opportunities available to you, an abundance of professional riches and experiences to look back on. So just be yourself and keep on keeping on.
Keep on keeping on. I like that, Ellen. And thank you. That was a great way to round things out. Some beautiful lessons for all of our younger selves, but we can apply them now. It's not too late. Even if you're retired, Jennifer, there's things that you can apply in your volunteer roles or whatever you're doing. I love everything that you guys said. It was really, really wonderful. And thank you so much for this discussion today. You did not disappoint me, at least. I got a lot of great ideas and inspirations for each of you. I just have a few really quick closing remarks. The CCA's Women in Consulting community, Women in Consulting community and the Leadership Development community are open forums to any actuary. So just please reach out to the CCA if you want to join these communities. Now, and a reminder that there will be a follow-up discussion on what was presented and discussed today on March 15th. Show up if you want to have a little more in-depth discussion on any of the questions that were posed, or if you want to follow up on the questions that you posted in the chat or otherwise that we unfortunately were not able to get to. Also, I want you to check out the network of Actuarial Women and Allies online and on social media, also affectionately known as NAWA. Or Adrian's group, but whatever you want to call it. Network of Actuarial Women and Allies is online and a great social media way to connect. I want to thank Shannon Peterson, my hero, and CCA staff for helping to organize today's event. She is awesome. And Michael Clark, who was mysteriously working in the background, helping make sure I'm asking the right questions and keeping on time. He's a past president of the CCA and co-producing the event today. So join us for upcoming CCA events and follow us online at CCA. Thanks, everyone. This has been fabulous for me, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Tanya, thanks, ladies.